12,000 years ago began the first instances of modern agriculture with the domestication of plants and animals. Parents taught their children the knowledge gained through trial and error, and progress was slowly made. The circumstances have slightly changed in the modern era. Heavy machinery and genetically modified crops have allowed farmers to increase production exponentially. With the progression of technology and the creation of a wider array of jobs, more of the population live in urban centers as opposed to rural communities. At the turn of the century, there were approximately 2 million farms with an average acreage of 450, and only 2% of the population lived on farm. The total acreage of farmland, however, is roughly the same as it has been since the 1930s. Growing up in an agricultural town on the Central Coast, I was surrounded by small family farms. I remember as a child my father would point out the different orchards and tell me the stories of who owned what and how their families got there. I was surrounded by the history of how our town began, with only single-lane dirt roads, to a modern town with chain stores and a movie theater. After every story, my father would end with, "It was a simpler time then." From a young age, he taught my brothers and I how to drive a nail, move irrigation pipe, and operate a forklift. I can recall my brother Nico and I one summer standing off to the side in awe at how smooth and efficient he was in everything he did. We aspired to be like him. Our core values derived from my father's and grandfather's actions and stories, traditions we want to keep and pass on to our children someday. Now, times have changed. From the coast to inland Santa Cruz Mountains, the area used to be all apple orchards, and now larger companies have moved into the area and have begun to shift aspects in the local agriculture. The main crops produced now are berries, followed by other row crops. The water requirements of berries in particular is substantially more than that of apple trees. Due to the coastal climate, apples in the area only need to be irrigated once a year, twice on dry years. Berries must be watered once a week or so to produce a healthy crop. There was no issue with the level of the aquifer until berries began to be planted on a large scale. When the first wells began to run dry, the local farmers were surprised. The wells were dug deeper, and it seemed to remedy the problem for a time. Now, even those deeper wells are running dry. The current drought that the entire state is affected by is not resolving the issue either. Measures have been taken by these large berry farms to ensure their survival. Aside from the standard lobbying of water rights, an experimental crop site has been established to develop new types of drought and pest-resistant varieties. 10 acres of Class 1 farmland was covered with gravel to eliminate any variable that the soil can cause. The old-timers in the area never believed such a thing could or would happen. Those who reside in rural communities fear the growth of large corporate farms and the economic effects they will cause. A study done by Lyson and Welsh analyzed the effect a large corporate farm had on a rural community. Their study found that large company farms brought unemployment as well as poverty to the small towns they became a part of. When there are only small-scale farmers in the community, they tend to purchase goods from other local sources, such as farm equipment dealers and seed suppliers. Rural towns generally revolve around agriculture. If those farms are replaced by a corporation, the keystone is removed. Farmers are then forced to either work for the company that replaced them or find other employment, which may lead to them leaving the town. Corporate farms tend to shy away from local business due to their high prices. These large farms typically purchase their equipment and supplies from a centralized dealer. By ordering from a centralized dealer, costs are kept to a minimum and efficiency is improved. We in the younger generation must look at things on a larger scale though. The world is smaller with modern transportation to ship products worldwide in days, and technology to improve all aspects of life. Proponents for company farms argue that it is necessary for these large-scale farms to exist in order to provide food for the world's growing population. Large farms make up 10% of the number of farms and yet yield 80% of the country's food and fiber. With the world population growing exponentially, it is more important now than ever to find more efficient ways to utilize the limited resources we have. Times are changing and we may need to change as well to meet the world's demand, but simpler times should not be forgotten. Small family farms still hold a place in American culture and keep the traditions that we grew up with.